Well, welcome everybody. I'm Danielle with Birdland MediaWorks, and I'm joined by Cindy Reednauer of Skinny Leopard Media, and we are really excited to have an award-winning broadcaster, Graham Mack, with us today. And we're going to talk a little bit about the book, The Data Collectors, and we'll talk about his broadcasting career and maybe a little bit of his music career. So thank you for joining us.
So you didn't explain then how you actually got into audiobooks. So
okay.
Give us a little bit about that.
So I was working in radio for a long time in Australia, different radio stations. I went to bigger and bigger stations. I worked at 3 different ones in the end. And I'd moved back to Britain in 1997 because I found at the time that not sounding Australian was holding me back. And I thought, well, why the hell don't I come to Britain? I still sound British. And my wife kind of likes Britain. We managed, Julie's parents are Welsh, so she could get a British passport. So it wasn't, because she's a New Zealander, so it wasn't hard to, we didn't need immigration or anything to sort that out. So we came back in. I worked for lots of different radio stations, and I became a program. There were 3 radio stations I worked at along the way, where I was also the program director in charge of programming, hiring and firing at the radio station. And I'd ended up at a station in London called Fix Radio, and I was the program director. And I was also on the air a little bit, but I was mainly the program director there. And it was a radio station for tradespeople, believe it or not, for people who fix air conditioning. So it was like the perfect thing. But the radio station had different ideas about the direction they went, and long story short, they let me go. And this was in February. So we went to New Zealand to visit Julie's parents. We went on holiday, which turned out to be a mistake because then COVID and lockdown hit and all that. So then I get back to Britain in like March. So I haven't got a job. And now all of a sudden with COVID, there are no radio jobs. And I had interviews set up with 3 different BBC radio stations. I had meetings booked in London. Everything got cancelled. No one would talk to me. Nobody wanted, because nobody knew where this was headed or what's going on. And I thought, I need to make a living now. And so there's a radio consultant in Los Angeles who I get on very well with. His name is Dan O'Day. He used to be on the air in Los Angeles. And he runs a course. He charges a lot of money for it. He runs a course on how to become an audiobook narrator that a lot of radio people, because we've all voiced commercials. In fact, at the small stations in Australia, most of what you do all day is voice commercials. Your air shift is like a small part of the job. That's often what you're hired for, and you have to be very, very good at doing characters quickly, reading things quickly. Otherwise, you're going to be there all day, and if you've just done a breakfast show, you just want to go home. So you get very good at producing from scratch because you self-produce them, churning out these commercials for local advertisers. So Dan realized there's a lot of people with that kind of talent that would make good audiobook narrators and could do the production side of it as well. And so he runs this course, and I thought, well, I'm just going to have a go without Dan's course because I need to get this going. So that was in March, and I went on ACX and found out how it all worked, and the first one was about soldiers in India in the 1800s. It was a series, and I got the second book in the series out of that one, and then I did that. And at the moment, there are 10 audiobooks for sale, so I think I've done about 25, but there are a few that, and I'm working on 4 at the moment. I had an offer about half an hour ago, which I knocked back, but it's just been something that so this is what you would call a closet. So I bought these tiles off the internet, and I put them up, and I bought a broadcast mic because I knew what I wanted. I bought a mixer, and I got all set up, and I got hired I now do a show. There's a radio station in London called Podcast Radio, which is a talk station that just plays podcasts. But I do a chart show, the Pod 20, and I count down the top 20 podcasts that week, and I interview the podcasters who are on the podcasts as well. And I do that show from here too. And they pay me to do that, and I just send them the MP3. And so I've pitched out a couple of other radio show ideas, and I've pitched them out, and who knows, that might come of something. But in a very short period of time, I worked out I have to learn to earn a living from home. And so audiobooks is now most of of my income now is through audiobooks. That's if you said like, you mean you could take the podcast radio show away and I'd still be fine with the audiobooks. So it's what I do now. So that was it, and I didn't know a thing about it, and I think I made a lot of mistakes at the beginning that I wouldn't have made if I'd taken Dan's course. But it's been great.
For the people that I contract with, it was trial and error, and I'm like, okay, the settings have to be here, and it has to be, and there was a lot of fighting with it. And like you, I started off like, this is maybe 6 months to a year now, but when I started off, we had a walk-in closet that I was just moving blankets over and trying to pack it in as much as possible just to dampen the sound. And it is funny when the president of a company that is working with you, you say, I hope you don't mind, but could you record in my closet?
Just another one of those things. It's like, no, I want to do this, and I enjoyed doing it, and I looked at it and how it all worked, and it was another one. I'm just determined, and you go on YouTube and you find out how to do the mastering and exactly how the setup needs to be with the filtering and the all the rest of it for it to meet the ACX standards and all that. So I worked it out pretty quickly, and there are people to help, and then it's just been so much fun because sometimes I'll do like a business book and it'll be like quite interesting or not. And then other times I'll do something like, wild sci-fi with topless mermaids. Or a topless mermaid. There's one topless mermaid, wasn't there?
So do you have
In fact, she's not a mermaid. You just ask her. She's not a mermaid.
Do you read the book first before you start recording?
I skim through it and get a general idea. And then if there is a particular piece that I don't quite get, I'll read that out loud first, but only like a paragraph or a page. And then I go, okay, right, now I know this. Now I know what's going, because you've got to know what it all means. You can't just read words off a page and hope it makes sense. You've got to, So no, I don't read the whole book. I'll skip through and see kind of where it heads. And, if there's a particular character and you wonder where they end up, and you might need to know a little bit about that, but not really. No, I pretty much just start at one end and end up at the other.
You mentioned Odessa because I hear these characters in my head, which I know sounds mental, but when I was developing her character, I created all these people that I wanted to be friends with. The first draft, when I first started working out, these are all people that I wanted, that I liked, and they were perfect and polite. And I heard her in my head going, "You are so boring. Your characters are so boring.
She turned on you.
You need to throw some more angst and like dysfunction." So I went back to each of the characters and actually thought, okay, in what way can I damage them?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny though, the way the characters, do you think that she turned on you?
No, I never thought of her as the enemy.
Because I had a weird experience when I was doing your one with Ivan.
Uh-huh.
As you'll know, when I went through it, for some reason, the character Cepheus, now and again I pronounced it as Cephas, for no reason. And you'd pick them up, and I had to go back in and drop in and get it right. It was, and it's like, how can I, all right, it's a name I'm not familiar with, but how can I suddenly change the name of the character? And I realized it was Ivan. And I blame Ivan.
I almost told you that. I almost said, you know what, don't bother to change it on Ivan, but then you would have had to remember that Ivan was Cephas and Cepheus was everything.
No. But it was a mistake. It shouldn't have happened. I'm convinced, and I told my wife this, and she thinks I've gone mad. I said, no, Ivan got the guy's name wrong, and then after hearing it, I started reading it wrong too. And she went to me, Ivan isn't real.
Now
you got it wrong.
Say, guess what? He is real.
And to me, he was real. And I somehow, I think maybe subconsciously, I thought that Ivan is the kind of guy that would pronounce somebody's name wrong just because he's like that. And then when I heard it, I started doing it wrong too. Just because, so I think he turned on me a little. Even though that does make me sound mentally ill.
I didn't want to confuse it because I almost shot you back a message and said, okay, keep it Cephas, but only with Ivan, because we had already gotten 3/4.
None of the other narration I got it wrong. None of the other characters got it wrong until he got it wrong. and then everybody else, and I didn't even know he was saying it wrong. and then everybody else, including me, started getting it wrong and not knowing we were doing it wrong.
In the time remaining, I know you've given us so much of your time. Do you want to touch on your music at all? Because you're a guitar player and a singer, aren't you?
Yeah, I when I went to New Zealand, when we emigrated to New Zealand, I thought, I've always wanted to buy a guitar. I've always wanted to play guitar. I'll buy a guitar and take that with me. So I bought it was a copy of a Fender Stratocaster. It wasn't a real Fender Stratocaster, it was a copy of one. And so I brought it out, and it remained in my home, and I never touched it until my parents went back home. And something weird happened. When they left me in New Zealand, I suddenly realized, well, now it's me. And I always felt, they were loving parents, I'm sure, but I always felt I was held back. And all these things all suddenly happened as soon as I could be me. I'm not a great guitar player. I'm an okay guitar player. But not long after I met, I was in a band in the UK that never really did any gigs called the Hubcaps. We were terrible. We wrote songs. We thought we were great. We were terrible. I was like 17. In New Zealand, Julie had a friend who was a guitar player and had been in bands, and he was kind of a new wave punk kind of guy. He's into the Clash and people like that. And there was a big ball for the hairdressers in the town, the hairdressers ball. And they were doing a thing to finish the night of it wasn't karaoke, they were singing live, but it was like tribute. It was like hairdressers dressed up as, there was a Tina Turner. There was a girl who was a hairdresser, and she dressed up like Tina Turner and did Simply the Best and whatever. And I can't remember the reason why, but me and Mike and a couple of other guys, and I don't know why we were going. Oh, no, Wheels, the bass player, knew a hairdresser or something. Anyway, long story short, we decided to do the Beatles. And I was going to be, and I had the hair back then, like that, and I was Beatle Paul, and we did this and played live, and it was fun. I think we only did like 3 tunes, but it went down really well. We did Twist and Shout, and we did Day Tripper for some reason. Anyway, one of the people there was one of the salespeople at the local radio station, funnily enough, but I wasn't in radio. And he came up to us afterwards and said, "That's really good. I think we could do this, and I'll be your manager." And we're like, "Wow, we've done 3 songs and now we've got a manager." And so he managed us, and we formed a group, and we called it Liverpool Direct, because I was from Liverpool. But the other 3 guys weren't. They were New Zealanders. So what we used to do is, while we could all sing, they were not allowed to talk. So I would introduce all the songs, and we were kind of conning people that we were from Liverpool on tour, and we did Beatles, but we did Beatles and Stones, and this was at a time when there was a TV show called Tour of Duty, so there was a lot of 60s music on the TV, and the 60s was still selling quite well this is the 80s. And it was like a thing, and we did the Who and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and the Searchers and all that. We wore the suits and the ties and whatever, and we did all right for that. With that, we made quite a bit of money at that for a few years, and then it ran its course, and I got married, and then there was a band in this is a town called Whangarei, New Zealand. And there was a band that had been around for ages, and they'd had many lineups, and they were called the Misfits, and they were they were the top band. And it was funny, when I first went there, I heard a band. I went to a club, and there was a band in a hall next to the club, and they were doing a version of Hippie Hippie Shake by Swingin' Blue Jeans, which was one of my favorite songs. And I had to go and check it out, and it was the Misfits and whatever. And their lead singer, something had happened. I think he went to jail, and I wanted to put Liverpool Direct back together, but with different musicians, because the ones I had got a bit sick of it, because they weren't into the music. I loved all that 60s stuff, but they weren't. The drummer was into U2, the guitar player was into the Clash, and the bass player was into who was it? The Cure. So it really wasn't working out, although I was into Beatles and stuff. I was happy with it. these guys, the Misfits, approached me and said, would you like to be our new lead singer? I was like, wow. And the next minute, I'm in the top band in town, and that really took off because we were on TV, we played on Telethon in New Zealand, and it went out national. We played live, and John Farnham, I don't know if you know John Farnham, Australian singer. Anyway, he was on the show as well, and he mimed, and we were live. Yeah, and we did, and that went really, really well. And I didn't actually even give that up until we moved from New Zealand to Australia, and I was an air conditioning engineer because I was still, we were playing 3 nights a week in the band, but I was still going to the refinery and making, that money. It was terrible as well because in the band you play the pubs and stuff, and you put like $5 on the door, and the bar takes the bar takings because we'd pull a crowd. And we got $5 off everybody that came in, and we worked out we could play for 5 hours a night, no problem. We had 3 different shows, and we could play for 5 hours a night. Because if you start early and you're taking $5 on the door, the pub may only hold like a couple of hundred people, but you might get 1,000 people through in 5 hours. As it turns over, as people only go stay for an hour, $5 off each one of them. So then when you split the money up at the end of the night, and the terrible thing was all cash. And I know this is very wrong, but it was all cash. And I would have shoe boxes under the bed full of cash because you couldn't put it in the bank because then, the taxation would see the... because they had no idea how much we'd take on the door. So, yeah, crazy days, but good fun, yeah. And then I didn't do music for a long, long time until about 2005. And I always liked blues, and so I put together a blues band, and I was working at a radio station in Bournemouth, and Graham Mack Blues Band got going with some really good guys. I had a great harmonica player, Hugh Budden, and then I moved up to Teesside in the northeast, and I put 2 different Graham Mack blues bands together. One of them played, one of them had a stand-up bass, because blues is such a, spectrum. At one end you've got like blues rock, which is electric, and at the other end it's almost like jazz. So I had we had one lineup at stand-up bass and everything, semi-acoustic guitars, and the other one was all electric, so we do more Chicago, but it depended on where we got the bookings. And then I worked for the BBC. I worked in Swindon. I did a breakfast talk show in Swindon, Wiltshire. And it was the first time I'd done really hard-hitting talk. I'd always been like a DJ, playing music and telling jokes and doing characters and fun and comedy. Well, I was like a journalist. And so they got in the leader of the local council, and they were announcing a load of layoffs at the council, and he just got a pay rise and was on a 6-figure salary. And they said, you're going to interview him, and you've got to challenge him about this. And so I went to town. He came in, and I mauled him. I said, these people who've got no jobs, and you're sitting there on £120,000 a year. What have you got to say to these people? And, really gave it to him big time. And then he got to the end of it, and you could see he was like, he's just been hammered by me, and he was like, reeling from that. When I did my research, I found out that he was a guitar player. And his heroes were people like Thin Lizzy and Stevie Ray Vaughan and people I really liked. And so I said to him, oh, thank you very much for coming in, Gavin, the leader of Swindon Borough Council, etc. I said, just before you go, it was a real like Columbo, one more thing. I said, you fancy yourself as a guitar player? Are you any good? And he went, I think I'm okay. I said, oh, great. So I pulled out the electric guitar from under the bench. I said, just hold that for a minute. Plugged it into the amp that I had underneath the broadcast desk, stuck the mic in it. I said, let's see how good you are, and put him on the spot live on the air. Wow. And I've already just beaten him up. And under pressure, he goes for it. And he was brilliant. Wow. And so, I mean, everyone's talking about this interview that takes this real twist, and he really was good. And so I said to him, afterwards off the air, I said, we should form a band. And he said, what? He said, well, really, he said, I'm the leader of the council and all that. I said, look, here's the deal. I work for the BBC, which is a public broadcaster. I'm not going to be allowed to charge money for gigs. Why don't we form a band and we only do gigs for charity? So we make no money ourselves. We just do it for fun. And he said, yeah, that could work. So he found a drummer and a bass player. I played rhythm guitar, he played lead, and we formed the Graham Mack rock band. And we would go and do gigs. And what we used to do, because we didn't want to take work away from working bands either, is we would find a gig that was on and a working band was booked, and we would open for them. But because I was on the radio and he was the leader of the council, we'd get all the publicity in the press that bring it in, and the money. And I think in the first year, I think it was about £30,000 we raised for local charities. All the money stayed local, and it was charities. And a lot of the charities would book us, and I'd say, yeah, well, you need to book a working band as well. Okay, and they booked the working band, and then it turned sometimes the working bands were supporting us, but at least they were getting the work. We weren't taking work off them, and it worked out great for a little while there. It wasn't until I got fired from that radio gig and I had to move again that wound up, and that was a lot of fun. I made no money, not a penny, and it was just great. We did all rock covers, we did All Right Now by Free and Come Together by the Beatles and that kind of stuff, and that was a real fun time. It was
I
really
find that amazing. You tore him apart, and then you're like, hey, let's start a band together, and then you helped him redeem himself, right? You're saying how greedy he was, and then he ended up doing all this great work for charity and finding work for other musicians. So you're helping him turn that whole thing around.
It was good fun. It was good patter as well, I could say. And, because I'd introduce the band, and I'd say on lead guitar, the leader of Swindon Borough Council, Gavin, I give him a great round of applause. Or unless you've got problem with your bins or anything, he's the man to see. Sewerage.
It was so funny. I had it on my list of questions for one of us to ask you about, like a life lessons from your career. And for some reason, the word sneaky keeps coming to mind, because throughout your story, I just find it funny, all these little ways that you kind of wove in opportunities, but that's not it. But that's when you're in local radio, you have to look for ways to sneak around. Like, for instance, if there's something going, you've got to get publicity for what you're doing. And I've moved around a lot, so I've had to go somewhere as a total unknown and have to get known as quickly as possible. So you have to be sneaky and pull tricks. It's like when I first moved to Bob FM, I was a program director and breakfast show presenter at Bob FM. It was when they had the Scottish referendum on independence for Scotland. So I just announced, right, we're banning Scottish music on this radio station. We're not playing anything by anybody Scottish. And it just went ballistic. I was interviewed on things in the US, and the Scottish Nationals threatened to firebomb the radio station and boycott advertisers and everything. All of a sudden, I got known in the area. I hope they like your Ivan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but so you've just that's part of it is trying to always find a way, because maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe because I thought I was always held back. I've always thought, no, you're not going to stop me. So I try different things.
But that's good. I love your determination, because, and Cindy can attest to this, we've worked with so many people who were doing publicity for them, and they have all these grandiose of how it's going to be. They're going to be on Oprah and Dr. Phil and doing all this in a week. And when in 6 months it doesn't happen, they go on to the next thing. And they go through this cycle of, oh, that didn't work, let me try something else. And you just stuck with it. You adapted and you stuck with it. And to me, I think that's an important message for people. Like, if you stick with what you love, you'll get there. You just have to be willing to stay.
Yeah, but I never dreamed when I got into radio that I'd be doing audiobooks. And I absolutely love it. It's so much fun. The best ones are the ones like yours with the characters and that, where it really is. You're just having fun, and you've got, and I think, oh, I'll try them this way, or I'll try them that way, and then that, the author might go, no, that's not right. And I had that with one. It was the last sci-fi one I did. It was with Time Leap, and it was the main character's girlfriend. And after the 15-minute check, the author said, no, you haven't got her right. That's and I changed it, and then he was fine. But what's the big deal? You just change it. It's not like you have to go back and do a load of work again or something. It's not like you've just, the air conditioning that you fixed yesterday isn't working now. Come and fix it properly. It's not like that, because that's real stress, because you can't charge for a callback.
Well, don't get too, I want you to be busy, but don't get too busy, because I've got 2 more in the series coming.
I'd love to do them. I'd love to do them. If you like the first
book, you'll really like the second one, because now I'm like 90% of the way through the second one thinking, the first one was okay, but this one's really good. Now I know what I'm doing. So
yeah, because you've got the characters all set up now, and now it's about putting them in different situations and see how they cope and see how they react.
Yeah, so you got to push them a little bit more. So yeah, hopefully.
See what they can take.
Exactly. Hopefully November. So
November. Oh, cool. So in time for Christmas then.
I'm hoping. We'll see. And I'll rely on Cindy for actually putting the manuscripts, and so she's been instrumental in actually publishing both the ebook and the print versions. So
right, I see.
That side, and you doing the audio. So depending on your availability and Cindy's availability, yeah, probably before Christmas.
And what's your background, Cindy? How did you get involved in the crazy world of books?
Well, about 8 years ago, I had just closed 2 restaurants I owned. And I met someone who said, I've written a book and I don't know what to do with it. And I said, wow, I've always wanted to be a book publisher. And they said, well, you go learn what you need to learn. I'll be waiting and I'll be your first client. And she was, and that's what started. And she ended up doing 6 books with me. And then I just, a lot of my clients come back. I just published the 7th book for an 80-year-old man that he writes for kids, and it's all referral business. So wow. So just another story of opportunity and going for it. Yeah.
And if you need a voice, I know a guy for
When are you going to do a character though, Danielle? When are you going to be part of it? You should write in a character that you can do, and I'll leave gaps, and then you put them in.
Oh, I like that, Danielle.
There you go.
You would co-narrate something?
Yeah, why not?
Oh, that is awesome. What a great idea.
That could be fun.
And this time around, just my work schedule got so crazy, so it wasn't feasible. But I actually thought, I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to have like a male and female voices for an audiobook? I will absolutely take you up on that if you're not crazy busy when the time comes.
I'm doing one now that could really need that, but it's finished now. And the one I'm doing, it's a romance novel, and there's a guy and there's a girl. And I have to play both parts. It does like one chapter of the guy and one chapter of the girl, but obviously they're both in it because they talk to each other within their chapters. And I looked at it, I mean, I've done it, but I always thought that why didn't they just get a female narrator to do the girl parts? Because I'm not a girl.
Danielle, when we have done our courses, we do a lot of things with meditations and mindfulness, and Danielle is always the voice that does the meditations because she has such a beautiful voice. So when she initially said she was going to hire someone, my first thought was, oh, Danielle, you have the beautiful voice. Don't waste it. But I love your voice too, Graham. So everything is great. But,
it's the yoga voice. It's the yoga. People laugh at me. So I taught yoga for 18 years. And when you go in, you're all boisterous. But then, when you're ready to teach yoga, then you go into the yoga voice.
The calm voice.
So Cindy just likes the yoga voice.
You could have been the yoga teacher in your book.
Well, you'll come to...
Mind you, you die. Oh, I don't want to give that away.
Or does she?
That's right, or does she?